Welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. This is a topic that, we try to do one of these webinars a month, bring in, someone from not my network that's influencing the RIA world and offer some education and some resources if you need them. Oftentimes we're talking about marketing or business development or, how to get more introductions and referrals and things along those lines. So we're a little bit, kind of a different topic today, but super, super important for RIAs, especially people who are making that jump from a large wirehouse where much of this stuff is taken care of for them. Carm and I have been buddies now for a couple of years, Carm, two,
Yeah.
3 years, something like that. And you were a recent podcast guest on the RIA Collective podcast back in end of 2025. And you got such a good message, man, and such an important resource that I figured let's do this as a webinar too, so that, we can get some clips out of it, record it, get some good content, inspire the people that join us today. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Charlie Van Derven. I'm the founder of Social Advisors. I act as a chief growth officer for RIAs and independent advisors. Today, I am joined by Carm Cicalese, Cyber Chick, and we're going to talk about cybersecurity and the importance of cybersecurity outside of, FINRA SEC has the requirements, Carm, but as you were telling me on the podcast a few months back, don't assume that you're covered just because you fit the standards there. So a couple of topics we're going to jump through is why SEC and FINRA standards are not enough to protect your firm, how to reduce liability with the right mix of compliance and insurance and controls. You can see me looking up, Carm. I am reading some notes because this is your world, not mine, dude. Practical steps you can take now without massive cost, how to offer cybersecurity as a client value add and a marketing differentiator. I've got some comments on that, by the way. And why security and growth are more connected than most advisors realize. So, Carm, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Charlie, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be here. But I got to ask, are we recording?
We are recording. Let me double check, Carm. Good. Yep, we're recording, man. We're in good shape. Thank you for the reminder. So I think we're going to talk for maybe 35, 40 minutes. If you have any questions, any comments, there's a Q&A box down below. There's that chat box down below. Carm's going to be doing most of the talking. I got some questions to ask him. But by all means, as we kind of, go from mic to mic, we'll check in on those questions. So don't be afraid to pop those questions in at any time. No need to wait till the end. In fact, that kind of makes it more interesting, takes us in different directions a little bit. So yeah. Also at the end, Carm, you got a great giveaway. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we have the interactive cyber assurance tool, and it's something that we designed a few months ago for a business social, just so that business owners could visualize their cybersecurity status. And frankly, it was a hit. Business owners really liked it. So we improved on it, we worked on it, and now we offer this for people who come to events like this. So again, you'll be able to take a look at it. It's available online. Make sure you have the link or the QR code at the end, and then you can check it out. And if you have any questions about it, you can talk to us or talk to your cybersecurity provider.
Very cool. Very cool. So, and let me say this, I'll put on my compliance hat for a second. This is educational. We're not offering necessarily advice. Carm can do that offline a little bit if you've got a scenario that you need some help with. But yeah, anyway, there's my disclosure and disclaimer, Carm.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right, let's start with the big misunderstanding. Right? We kind of mentioned it already. Advisors have, by FINRA and SEC standards, some cybersecurity rules, if you will. Carm, let's talk a little bit about what those rules look like, and then furthermore, why that's not enough.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So you look at this, if I can back up though, just a little bit from a historical.
Sure.
So SEC and FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, and the Security Exchange Commission designed your rules many years ago that predate a lot of cybersecurity standards and frameworks, just because they recognize that these are the things that had to get done, and they've updated them along the way. But what FINRA tells you things that you have to meet, and SEC tells you things that you have to disclose. And the good thing is, if you do those things, or you're prepared to answer those disclosure, and you meet some of those FINRA standards, you are on your way towards meeting a cybersecurity framework or a cybersecurity standard that is bigger than both of those. But understand that they're just hitting the highlights of what they thought were important. So just because you've done that, and of course you've got to do that, doesn't mean that you've done enough. And that's kind of where I differentiate, where we say compliance, doesn't equal security.
Very cool. So if you're an RIA, what's, Carm, kind of a standard, I guess the question I'm asking directly is, how do breaches happen? Right? Like, we assume the custodian's covered, you hit the FINRA and the SEC recommendations. What's most common that you see with RIAs when there's a data breach?
So the most common vulnerability is through somebody in the system, right? So people are half your attack surface. Your tech stack is half the attack surface. But people are the most vulnerable, and that's where those email and phishing attempts come in, or people doing things online that they should not have done or should not have been allowed to do. A couple of examples is going to a freeware site because you want to make a video for your company, and then downloading that video, and that video had malware on it. Right? And that's something that person probably should not have been allowed to do. That site perhaps could have been blocked, technically speaking, but you also should have had a policy that would have prevented or told somebody, you don't do this. So that people, processes, and technology all have to work together. But again, people are the biggest vulnerability. And then when it comes to technology, am I keeping my stack updated? So I keep my operating system updated, my applications updated, and then what are really the essential technologies that I need to have in place to protect from being breached, like a very well-tuned firewall or intrusion protection system, or something even larger like a security operations center.
On the marketing side, we actually see this with websites fairly often, right? So if someone's developed, say, a WordPress website with a third party that sits on a server somewhere, and whatever security they had on that website has an update, though their website host maybe hasn't, updated that security plugin, we see a lot of, potential security issues with even the messages that are coming through websites with a link.
Yeah, because if you look at a website, is it a website where you or your clients are logging in to access information? Right, that's a very big threat. And then you have to make sure that you're keeping your WordPress updated, and that whoever is responsible for maintaining that site is constantly checking for updates and checking for the latest vulnerabilities to keep that tight. Now, if you just have an informational website where it's just, you click to look to see what you have and perhaps you enter your contact information, there's not as much vulnerability in there. However, the bad guys can still leave gifts behind for the administrator that the administrator accidentally downloads, and then the website gets compromised. So the same thing can happen in either scenario.
Yeah,
it does. Every facet of what you do has to be perpetually updated. So going back to your question 2 questions ago, you look at people being vulnerable. Are they trained? Do they know what the threats are? Do they know what to do? Do you have processes in place, and do they know what to do with them? And then on technology, it's typically not staying updated.
yeah.
And then a little bit also of what technology you have in place to prevent someone from breaking in.
When we chatted on the podcast a few months ago, we talked a little bit about custodians, and one thing that surprises a lot of RIAs is that the custodian, isn't necessarily their security blanket. They're there to protect themselves, right? So where do RIAs misunderstand the custodian's responsibility versus the advisor's responsibility?
So first, go read the agreement. And in any case, whether it's between you and the custodian or between the client and the custodian, and it is written in the custodian's favor, not because they're trying to stick it to anybody per se, but because you look at like the big 3, Schwab, Bank New York, and Fidelity, and you're looking at them, you're talking about $1 trillion moral hazard. Believe me, they're going to take all the proper steps to protect themselves. And they also invest perpetually in cybersecurity. So, they're applying very sophisticated frameworks. They're applying the most sophisticated technology, and they're making sure that people are trained. And they're doing a lot more than anybody else can afford to do to make sure that they meet their liability requirements and that the mistake is not on their end. But then what happens is the advisor might hand it off or have the client communicate to the custodian. And then the custodian and the client are in a relationship. And again, it's tilted, it's in favor of the custodian because they've done all their homework. But then what the vulnerability comes up is, let's just say the client loses money because their account was breached, and it's almost always inevitably their fault in some capacity because they clicked on something and their device got breached, or they didn't have a strong enough password, or they didn't enable the multi-factor authentication or something like that. But now they're angry and they're like, wait a second, I got to get my money back. But now they're going to look at the client, or the RIA, and they're going to look at the RIA and say, wait a second, you're the one who set up this relationship. And you're my financial manager, you're my risk manager. What could you have done to help me do this better? And what happens is, from a legal perspective, I'm no lawyer, I've just seen this, and I know this from speaking with lawyers, is that you might be seen as what you call the sophisticated party in the relationship. You should have known better. And now you've got a liability issue with your client. If you get breached, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously, the client relationship becomes severed at that point. So it's, you shared with me, Carm, in the past, custodians would actually drop an advisor.
Yeah.
Based on cybersecurity.
Yeah, correct. And that's where I was kind of going with my next comment, right? So, and what happens is now the RIA has been breached, and it's typically the same thing. And what happens is, and for example, still using personal devices to access the RIA's business enterprise. I know you want to. Everybody out there wants to say, well, what's the number one thing I can do? I can't tell you the number one thing. I can probably give you three things, but as we go through this, here's one of them. You should not have personally owned devices like laptops accessing, from home, your business enterprise to, for example, do a trade. It's just forget about it. Don't do it, right? But what happens is they don't have the security process in place. They get not breached once, but they get breached twice, and then the bad guys are actually able to make trades off of your platform. And we know of about 12 to 15 examples where that's happened.
Wow. Yeah. Listen, shifting gears a little bit, Derek's got a question for us. Derek, thanks for being here, man, and good question. Carm, Derek sent this in about 5 or 6 minutes ago, but earlier you had mentioned free apps that an advisor might be using that have malware on them. Are there apps that you see consistently? And then if so, are there alternatives that you can recommend?
Fair question. When it comes to free apps in general, there's only a couple that I'll really recommend offhand. And those are what the reputable ones, like Avast and Malwarebytes and Proton Mail. They offer free. Well, those are two free antivirus solutions. And then Proton offers like a free VPN, and so does Nord, for example. And those are reputable. A couple of examples. But like I would tell you this, remember this on a free VPN, you're not going to get as many hub points, so it's going to be slower. You just have to deal with that. But the purchase version is probably always stronger. When it comes to other ones, for example, the one instance I was referring as the person went to GitHub and download, and GitHub is a repository for a lot of things that have malware. When it comes to your device, your business service stack, you should have an inventory of the softwares you need, and that's really where you need to cap it. You really need to exercise some discipline on software. I mean, it's too tempting. Oh, I use this, I use that. And sometimes, like on your phone, for example, is a little bit different scenario, but it's frustrating. Every medical clinic you go to wants to say, oh, download our app, And it's like, I'm not downloading the app. I'll do this online, but I'm not downloading the app because I just can't manage hundreds of apps on a phone. It's just way too much risk. And the same thing for your devices.
Derek's going to love this follow-up question, Carm. Only because I know Derek well. What about AI, man? I use when I'm on calls. Now, I'm not talking about, account numbers or portfolio information whatsoever, but I use Fathom, which is a free app. Saves me an hour plus every day with follow-up notes and CRM notes. What about advisors, like having client conversations with an AI note taker? Are there ones that they should use? Are there ones they should avoid? Would you say don't do it at all? I mean, what's your take on that?
Another great question. Again, I recommend the paid for versions if you're going to do something. I'm going to stop short of endorsing some,
Yeah.
just because it's just, I don't want to go there and make everybody think that those guys said this one's great and you can use it. The crux of the matter, though, too, is what you're talking about. So I'll say, I have used Fathom before. I have had clients use Otter, and because we use like M365, I use the Copilot instance that comes with my company license. So I have used those. It's the way you use them and how do you make it as generic as possible. But here's the thing now too. When you're talking about somebody about their financial plans, is if you're not tossing out account numbers and passwords, really, what's the risk to having somebody somehow Charlie and Carm's conversation about Carm's financial plan for Charlie gets out there? What is the risk there? In my opinion, it's medium to low.
Yeah, we're in a review meeting, right, where we're looking at account sizes and, yeah, I don't, I mean, certainly advisors are having a much more sensitive conversation than I'm having with my clients. So yeah, and I think you're right. I think the paid version certainly there's a closed environment. I always, I worry about Fathom. Again, not that I'm doing anything that has any impact. We're talking about marketing plans and marketing results most of the time. But yeah, when it comes to advisor, I just think there's so much more sensitive information there.
Yeah, but this is becoming a very hot topic in my circle. I can go back about a year and a half, and I was at a forum with the Digital Directors Network, and the whole discussion was about AI. And you could actually sense that at the time, the cybersecurity crowd, we were maybe getting a little antsy.
Yeah.
And that's because at the time, cybersecurity was getting a lot of momentum as to being something important. But then what happens is AI comes along and kind of like pushed it off to the side and said, look at this bright, shiny object and how much money I can save you.
Yeah.
And the discussion is all about, okay, so now how does cybersecurity secure the AI platforms in these LLMs and MCPs? And just last week and this week, I'm in discussion with bank consultants and AI companies about, hey, how do, like, for these banks who are developing these AI solutions to help their clients, how do you make sure that they are secure and that where your data is going? So I can't guarantee you that everybody knows where it's all going right now.
Yeah.
What's the risk if something is exposed, and how would it get exposed?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Derek commented.
I understand, sir. I know everybody would love to hear right now, but I think
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you can build in a closed environment, right? Those notes, there's some recent note taker technologies that are industry specific, and having gotten a demo and knowing people that work at those companies, it's all closed, it's all closed loop, or so we think. 'Cause Derek's comment was not even the AI companies know where it's going necessarily. So, all right, Carm, we talked about custodians. We talked about SEC and FINRA, and how you've got to protect yourself, and that the requirements from the regulatory bodies are not necessarily covering you. The custodians are covering themselves. From kind of a minimum viable, what does an advisor need to be thinking about, and how do they get started in making sure that they're secure?
So I'm going to take on the second question first, which is
Okay.
how do you start? And I like to say that the first important cybersecurity decision you make is to choose a great IT partner that gets you the essentials to get you started, right? And those are things like password managers, multi-factor authentication, patch updates, antivirus, immediate backups, license, like your M365 or license management and the like. Those are very important to get you started. But then the second part to that is at the same time, you have to recognize that, what's IT's job? Their job is to make sure that your technology supports your business process and availability of your data. Cybersecurity perspective has some overlap. It's a little different. And it's looking at how do your people, processes, and technology ensure that your data is available, confidential, nobody else sees it, is not supposed to, like where's my AI going, and then maintains integrity, hasn't been manipulated, nobody's made a false trade, for example. So that concerns are a little bit different and outside of the IT scope. So it's not IT's fault if, for example, invoicing pays a fraudulent bill, or if HR changes somebody's checking account destination for their compensation when indeed it was an outside entity who was just manipulating that. So you have to appreciate those different perspectives. So I would say, and I'm going to share this, just a picture here of the cybersecurity framework real quick. And I'll just talk to this for a bit. Bear with me.
Certainly.
All right, here we go. So right now I'm just sharing like a picture of the cybersecurity framework. And there's 6 domains to it. Now, this came along after SEC and FINRA started. So, but now as SEC and FINRA just really updated themselves, their compliance, cyber compliance in the last few years, FINRA did make some efforts to map itself to some of these. For example, in the center, you see governance there, and you'll see in the FINRA compliance says that you need to have a business continuity plan, right? So that's an example where it maps to governance. But you have like identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. And most IT companies can help with part of identify. That's identifying your critical data, where it's stored, what are your critical processes, and how does your information technology support it? What's your inventory for your hardware and software type of things? And then protect, you think about, do I have privileged user access? Do I have annual training, multi-factor authentication, periodic patch updates, antivirus? All those things, they're very strong there. And then you have detect. Well, you could say antivirus is a little bit of detect, or maybe you've heard of something called an endpoint detection and response, or EDR. That starts to get into detect. And recover are your backups. Now you've colored in some of these items, but do you really understand that this is the holistic aspect to cybersecurity? It's not just checking these blocks of have I done these things compliance-wise. It's like, what are all the moving parts to this and what's going on? And do I understand that? So that's why I really stress is understand just the concept of the framework and see, and then you can start to think about, okay, where do I need to be stronger and where do I need to mitigate some of my risks? And, how does this all meld, then start to meld with like cyber insurance and my custodian?
Right. Yeah. When you engage with an advisor, Carm, do you walk through those requirements, or, the plan you just put up? Is that something that your company does when engaging with a new client, just to make sure that not only do they check the boxes for the regulatory, but also going beyond that with, I don't know, disaster recovery plans and continuity plans and things like that?
Yeah, we really like to dig into the governance plans to see if they're thorough enough. And again, one of the things I've run into, frankly, is, oh no, we're going to use AI and do it ourselves. Okay, that's fine. You can use AI to create a lot of things. Whether or not it's the right plan for you, or whether or not it's thorough enough to cover these different scenarios, because it's not just about like, business continuity is not just about a cyber breach. It's, what do I do if we have a pandemic again? What do I do if my site gets flooded? Yeah. And there's what happens if a meteor hits it? Where's my backup plan? Where's my alternate plan? What happens if people can't get to work and I have to peel back the number of people that I have available? And what are my services? So all of those things come into play. So, we like to dig into those, but I like to, and that's kind of like, not to sell this perspective, but that's why we built this. A cyber assurance tool was just kind of as a means to help visualize and then you can sit there and say, well, okay, I've got a pretty good handle on this. I just need to do some things to fix it, to patch it here or there. And then, or I might sit there and say, wow, I'm really not doing something. We need to do an assessment.
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we'll flash the QR code for that, for that resource before we wrap up here. So it sounds like a valuable tool. You'd mentioned e-partners a little bit earlier, but what's the difference between I think I know the answer to this already, but I want to just kind of have you elaborate on it. Speak to the differences of an IT provider or partner versus a cybersecurity provider or partner.
Yeah, so cybersecurity again goes deeper on some of those security functions, or again into not just technology, because most IT starts with the technology of people, processes, and technology. But where cybersecurity really, it starts to actually pick up next on the people, training them, making sure they know what to do, and then the processes, those governance and policy. In addition to like business continuity plan, incident response, disaster recovery, do you have an information security policy that tells everybody this is how we do business? This is the things that we do and don't do. And that's really not IT's business. Again, their job is technology, information technology to support your business processes. And that's getting beyond just the technology, because, and here's a kicker that I latched onto from one of my colleagues, and we were talking about the distribution of effort for cybersecurity of people, processes, and technology. Which one do you think would be highest?
People.
Yes, and it should be. Do you think most people would say that though?
No, I know you. I've had several conversations with you, so I kind of knew where we were going.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm cheating.
No, that doesn't. Yeah, but see, most people would say, "I need a technology. I need a silver bullet." Yeah. But the silver bullets don't exist. So when I said, you knew some of those basic technologies in place. But then what cybersecurity does is looks more at those people and processes and get those into place. And then you should be very choosy about the technologies that you're putting in after that. Because, those things can get expensive, but then again, they're not necessarily fixing the main problem. I mean, there's a zillion technologies, and I kind of come out of this from, my days in the government where comparatively, federal government has so much more dollars than all the businesses that, we deal with, and having access to that. And these large defense industrial based, companies have huge resources. The custodians and the big banks have huge resources, but independent RIAs and small, medium-sized businesses don't have those resources. So you can't buy everything out there to fix it.
We didn't necessarily plan this question, Carm, but I want to ask it anyway, because I think there's probably a lot of curiosity within our group here. What's a 5-person firm? What kind of expense are they looking at to engage an expert in this space versus just having the requirements from the regulatory? I mean, is it, are we talking $1,000 a month? Are we talking $10,000 a month? What sort of engagement do they need to be prepared for?
I think initially, if you haven't ever done a type of risk assessment, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of initial investment of maybe 8 to 10K.
Okay.
But then after that, it kind of depends on the results from that. Now, here's the thing: is you can go as fast or as slow as you want.
Sure.
You have to do it within your budget.
Yeah.
You can't boil the ocean all at once. But knowing what to do, picking a standard, for example, there's not a set cybersecurity standard out there. I mean, this kind of goes back to also to the liability question in the compliance thing. And I'm going to diverge just a bit or maybe backtrack, but look at just recently a software as a solution for fintech Figure was recently breached when someone clicked on a malicious email. The pretty large company, Allianz, world-class life insurance company, was breached last year. August 2024, Fidelity was breached. Are you going to tell me that these companies don't have world-class compliance and third-party risk management, and yet they were still breached? Right? So, then go back and put that into context and say, well, I hit all the compliance box, but what was the standard you were trying to meet? What were you trying to achieve? And to that end, because you don't have one set, you're probably looking at something like the Center for Internet Security or CIS standards, level 1, perhaps with some modifications to make sure that you hit those SEC and FINRA goals too. Same thing as you could even apply a federal standard like the Cybersecurity Maturation Model Certification, or CMMC. Again, this will make all the defense contractors go into convulsions, but even level 1 is a very secure standard if you meet it. So you do need to pick a standard to assess against. And then when you made that initial investment, from there, it's okay, now what are my priorities? How can I fix? What's the low-hanging fruit?
Sure. Very cool.
And I would actually say from there is start with governance, because governance dictates how you're going to act on a day-to-day basis and what you're going to do in crisis. At least have that in place so if something happens, you have something to work off of and improve your situation.
Yeah. All right, let's bring it into my world just a little bit, Carm.
Sure.
And maybe it's just a statement more than anything else, but we're always looking for differentiators. A line I like to use, and for some of you on this call, I hope this doesn't offend in any way. Advisors will tell you they're different in the exact same way. Service, service, service. Right. So that's the point a lot of people make. Our service is better than everybody else's. Cybersecurity can be an awesome differentiator, especially in an environment and world where this is commonplace, right? How many times, we run credit cards every month. I got to touch base with clients every month that their card's been compromised, and put a new card on file. So, data breaches happen all the time on an individual level like that, or you mentioned Fidelity on a huge level like that, right? So, as consumers, we're all concerned about data breaches. What a great differentiator for somebody who can speak to elevated cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think is you want to differentiate your service and to tell your clients that what you do extra to protect your business. And much of our conversation has been about that. What do I do to protect my firm? What are the things I can do to make sure that this doesn't happen to us? But then you can also say, what services do you make available to your clients? You don't necessarily have to provide it, but there are now services out there that are aimed towards individuals and families, and some of these services specifically work directly with wealth managers, and try to make excuse me, and their whole point is let's get that client secure, and let's work on their cybersecurity and cyber privacy to protect their family's assets. And we've seen that where in some instances the RIAs have said, you know what, I'm going to provide this to my top 100 clients, and everybody else knows about it. But what the big thing is, by letting your clients have access to it or availability, again, you don't have to necessarily pay for it, but by informing them of that, this goes way back to the beginning of our discussion when we were talking about liability. It's going to take some of your liability. Hey, I did what I could to help protect you. You chose to do it or not. Yeah. So your firm, what do you do for your firm, and what do you make available to your clients? Again, you don't have to do it for your clients, but make something available.
The industry, I preach this a lot. The industry suffers from a trust issue. And 99.999% of the advisors I've ever worked with have, are very, very pure and very focused on help. But you've got the one oddball that does something nefarious, and of course that's what the press picks up. And so, I think it's a great way to bridge trust. So, Carm, let's show the cyber assurance tool, man. Let's give everybody access to this for a minute or two if you want to pull up that QR code.
Let me pull up the picture of it real quick because I was kind of
Sure.
talking before, and then I'll switch to the QR code.
Okay, cool.
Right, so this is the interactive cyber assurance tool, and I was kind of giving that analogy earlier about, well, if I had a coloring book and I would color it in, what would it look like? So if I work with my IT company and I've identified my critical data and I know where my data is located and what are my processes and where how the information flows, and I've got an inventory of my hardware and software. Oh, to boot, let's just say I use like Ninja One, right? So I've done that too. Oh, but I haven't done like a risk assessment where I know what my threats and vulnerabilities are. So I'll leave that one blank. And then I go on to protect, and I've got unique users. I mean, that's generally, I'm not like using shared accounts, for example. I've managed the privileged users. So some more have more access than others, and I have a way of checking on that. I conduct annual training. We have multi-factor authentication and antivirus, and my data is encrypted. And you see the boxes are filling up, right? And that's what this is to do. Is if you're to go through all of these steps and answer the question, it helps look and see how much of these boxes do I have colored in. And I would say roughly you're looking to get about 70% of, I'm going to say you want to get all of them. If you get 70% on 4 of them, you're doing pretty well. You got some more work to do, but you're doing pretty well. And the reason I say that is there's 2 or 3 areas that are traditionally weak. And I said this before, it's detect, recover, and govern. Do I govern? Do I actually have do I have enough of the processes in place? Detect and recover. If I don't have an EDR and then I don't have something else, beyond that, like a security operations center or what they call a SIM, abbreviation is SIEM. If I don't have that, do I have enough in place? And I'll tell you, most don't, because that's what gets expensive. But again, there's strategies to mitigate that. So now I'm just that's what it looks like at the top. You can fill in your name and your email, your telephone number. We don't retain your information. It just goes to you. You can share it with whomever you want. If you don't like your answers, you can always go back at the bottom and reset it. You can always hit print if you want to. But once things are filled out a bit, and then you can you can hit submit assessment and it will get sent to you. Now I'm just going to stop my share for a moment, and I'm just going to share the QR code. And I'll put that up for a moment so you all can take a screenshot of it.
Yeah. So leave that up, Carm. We had a really good question come in from Stephen. If you're an RIA, Carm, and you had to choose better controls, better training, and better insurance, Stephen, good question, man. Where would you go first?
Better controls. I would go first to whoever is my cybersecurity subject matter expert. And then also, because again, in cyber insurance is, let's take a look at your insurance documents and your underwriting and see what you're supposed to meet. Because a lot of people don't realize that the meat is in there about what I'm supposed to do. Oh, by the way, when you're looking at the ICAT, those items that are bolded are typically cyber insurance underwriting questions. So the better you can answer those, the better rate you can negotiate. But bring your subject matter expert to the discussion with the insurer. Because A, it shows the insurer that you've got somebody that has some expertise, which is sometimes a question on your underwriting. But then it helps them, match up what you need. Because, well, do I need to protect myself from phishing attempts, from ransomware? What exactly is the threat I'm protecting myself? Am I protecting, my current operations or revenue, or my future, or my brand? What is it? So don't operate like in a silo with your eaches. Bring them all to the table, and they'll be able to communicate and coordinate with each other without a problem.
It's a good answer. I expected you to say better training, with people being the most vulnerable. But good answer. We got another question come in. Will my current cyber policy pay for a review of your services?
I don't know if your policy will pay for a review of my services. I'm happy to review your policy with you, just as a complimentary effort.
It's wonderful, man. You're gonna be busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's fun. Because
Yeah.
take a look at it and say, here, you do X, Y, Z. Whether or not you want to use us doesn't matter.
Yeah. Carm, do you want to drop your email in the chat?
Oh, sure.
And make sure you select everyone so that so everybody can see it. It's not hosts and panelists. And while you do that, Michael's got a great question here too. That Michael, I haven't been able to read the whole thing yet. So
is that Iggy Michael or the other, or a different Michael?
I don't know. Is this Iggy? Yeah, Mike. Yeah, I'm sure it is Iggy based on Michael's last name. For sure. In light of the 2024 Fidelity breach, how can an organization accurately determine its measure of effectiveness, MOE, for cybersecurity when no breach has occurred? Continuing on, does a lack of incident signify a robust framework or simply a lack of adversary interest?
Yes.
Iggy knows a thing or two about this stuff.
INSCOM, he's with INSCOM now. It's for Intelligence and Security Command. So
okay, very cool. Yeah,
I know where the loaded questions are coming from.
But also,
the other thing is, you could be having information siphoned and you just don't know it.
Sure.
Right. So, excuse me, but if someone's doing that, it's for some other purpose. And that's typically, if they're siphoning off your information, kind of the good news is, if there is a good news, they're not using it for exposure. They're using it to collect information for something way in the future that they're collecting information from somebody else, which is probably like a high-end nation state. But that doesn't mean, we had one, this was not an RIA, but we went into one company, no kidding. We were like, we whacked down an intrusion detection system, and we saw that, they're losing like a half a terabyte of data every Thursday evening at 1 a.m.
Oh,
yeah. He said, "Do you know what that is?" No. Okay, well, let's block.
Wow. Yeah, just a half a terabyte of data going out.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, nothing big. Yeah. Listen, this is a really important topic, Carm. It's one that, I haven't covered before in the webinars. And if anybody's interested, the podcast is called RIA Collective. Looks like we got a couple. Navy beat Army again, Joseph says.
Nobody asked him. I don't recall anybody asking that question.
Oh, we're getting off topic. That's okay. But Carm, this is thank you for being a resource for me and for my guests and your guests here as well. Super important topic. So Carm's email address is in the chat. And Derek, you're welcome, man. Thanks for being here as always. Appreciate it. So email address is in the chat, cybercic.com, cybercic.com for the website. Make sure you download this assurance tool. Really awesome tool you guys have developed, Carm. That's cool that it segments into the different, the 6 different buckets, if you will. Joseph, thanks for being here. Good feedback, dude. Good interaction from the crowd. You're a popular guy, Carm.
Well, like I said, I owe somebody money. I figured out technology here. I figured out where the Q&A were.
And yeah, if you're interested in Carm and I had about a 15-minute podcast conversation on RIA Collective. So if you want to go check that out, there's about 60 some episodes there, some from a legal perspective, some interviews of RIAs who have come from, from large firms talking about their route to independence. Carm, awesome to know you, my friend. I thank you immensely for being here today.
Charlie, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always fun.
Yeah, you got it. And everybody else who, took almost an hour of your lives to hang out with me and Carm, much appreciated. Replay will go out tomorrow. So if you need that for any reason whatsoever, we'll get that out to everybody who registered, and we'll put this thing up on YouTube and see if we can't get some future interest as well, Carm.
Sure thing. Hey, just one other thing though, plug for Charlie is, when I read the book, Never Split the Difference, the negotiator in it says, well, you got to speak calmly, like with that evening DJ voice. And I'm reading it, I'm like, that's Charlie Van Derven.
Dude, it's so funny. I don't know if it happens on the webinar, but when I drop into podcast voice, it's like, welcome to another. I don't know. It happens naturally, man. I thought about doing voiceover. I actually took a class or two, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick with my day job.
I think you
That'd
got
be
a good voice for it.
That might be fun. That might be fun. Maybe after my kids are out of the house and I got a little more time on my hands.
We can go back and do cartoon characters, and then
That'd be cool.
I'm not saying to have a cartoonish voice, but if you have a trained voice, to me, but who knows what Hollywood's looking for or whatever.
Carm, this is all natural, man. No, one entry level course was all it was to see if I was interested. But yeah, I don't know. We all got talents. I can grow a mustache. I got a good voice, and that's about where it stops.
Go with it.
I use my assets. Carm, thank you so much, man. Anybody who, anyway, so yeah, Carm, thank you for being here. If you got any questions for me, certainly hit me up on email or LinkedIn. And Carm, you're an easy dude to find on LinkedIn as well.
No problem.
All right. Have an awesome day.
Hey guys.
All right.
Bye.